The unthinkable has just happened. Mexico has fired back in a way no one saw coming, sending shockwaves through the U.S. auto industry. Decades of economic ties are now hanging by a thread as Mexico's latest move threatens to bring American car production to its knees. Factories could shut down, supply chains might collapse, and the consequences could ripple through the entire economy. Was this a strategic masterstroke or a desperate retaliation? And more importantly, can the U.S. survive this industrial gut punch? Buckle up, because this is the biggest automotive showdown in modern history. Trade tensions between the United States and Mexico erupted into a full-scale economic standoff after President Donald Trump officially signed a new round of tariffs on Mexican imports, marking a significant escalation in hostilities between the two nations. This aggressive move was framed as an effort to protect American jobs and bolster domestic manufacturing. However, the response from Mexico was swift and strategic, cutting off exports of critical industrial components to the U.S., including key auto parts that American manufacturers depend on. This tit-for-tat escalation has now placed multiple industries in crisis mode. Automakers, electronics manufacturers, and agricultural producers are grappling with immediate supply shortages and the looming threat of long-term economic instability. With both countries refusing to back down, the trade war is no longer just about policy. It's a high-stakes battle that could reshape the future of North American commerce. For decades, the U.S. and Mexico have developed an intricate trade relationship that fuels industries on both sides of the border. American companies rely heavily on Mexican production for cost-effective components, from semiconductors to automobile parts. However, the sudden halt of Mexican exports has sent shockwaves through manufacturing hubs in states such as Michigan, Ohio, and Texas, where assembly lines are now grinding to a halt. The disruption is not confined to factory floors. Retail businesses dependent on imports for essential goods are scrambling to source alternatives. Prices for consumer electronics, vehicles, and food products are surging due to constrained availability. Supply chain bottlenecks are intensifying inflationary pressures, further straining household budgets. Make sure to subscribe if you're finding this interesting. Beyond economic turbulence, geopolitical consequences are unfolding. Foreign investors are reevaluating commitments in both nations, fearing unpredictable regulatory shifts. Global markets are responding with volatility as financial institutions attempt to assess long-term ramifications. Meanwhile, policymakers face mounting pressure to negotiate resolutions that protect domestic interests without alienating crucial trading partners. Could a diplomatic breakthrough restore stability before irreversible damage occurs? The energy sector is also feeling the pinch. Mexico, a significant supplier of crude oil and natural gas, has imposed new tariffs complicating fuel procurement for American refineries. Higher energy costs are trickling down to logistics companies, increasing transportation expenses for businesses across various sectors. This escalation is forcing industries to rethink strategies, with some contemplating reshoring production to mitigate reliance on foreign sources. Agricultural producers, particularly those exporting corn, soybeans, and beef, are encountering retaliatory measures that threaten livelihoods. Small farms already struggling with climate-related challenges now confront declining revenue streams. Trade associations are lobbying Washington for subsidies to offset losses, but relief measures remain uncertain. In the automotive industry, leading manufacturers are reconsidering long-standing supply chain models. Some firms are exploring partnerships with Canadian and Asian suppliers to circumvent restrictions. Others are investing in domestic production facilities, though these transitions require significant capital and time. As workforce disruptions increase, labor unions are urging immediate intervention to prevent widespread layoffs. Financial experts caution that prolonged hostilities may trigger recessionary effects, diminishing consumer confidence and slowing economic growth. Companies with cross-border operations must adapt quickly or risk insolvency. While economic cycles are historically resilient, the depth of this crisis suggests recovery will be neither swift nor simple. If no resolution emerges, could this conflict mark a turning point in global trade dynamics? The auto industry is among the most susceptible sectors when it comes to supply chain disruptions. Modern vehicle manufacturing relies on a tightly coordinated, just-in-time production system, which minimizes inventory costs by ensuring that components arrive precisely when needed. However, this efficiency comes at a cost. Any disruption, no matter how small, can trigger a domino effect, halting production lines and leading to widespread economic consequences. Without essential parts such as semiconductors, wiring harnesses, and engine modules, major automakers like Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis have struggled to keep assembly plants operational. As a result, thousands of employees have faced temporary layoffs, leading to lost wages and decreased consumer spending. The policy decisions under former President Donald Trump's administration placed immense pressure on North American trade relationships, particularly with Mexico. Tariffs were imposed with the intention of coercing Mexico into renegotiating trade agreements to favor U.S. interests. While supporters of this strategy argued that it was a necessary move to protect domestic manufacturing jobs, many industry experts and labor unions contended that these measures were counterproductive. Instead of strengthening the U.S. auto sector, tariffs increased production costs, disrupted supply chains, and forced companies to consider shifting operations elsewhere. How can trade policies balance national interests while avoiding unintended harm to workers and businesses? Mexico, recognizing its vital position in the global supply chain, has taken a firm stance against economic coercion. The country supplies a significant portion of the automotive components used in U.S. factories, making it an indispensable trade partner. Mexican officials have made it clear that they will not be forced into unfavorable agreements without securing their own economic safeguards. This strategic positioning places the U.S. in a difficult situation. Either it concedes to more favorable trade terms for Mexico or risks pushing its southern neighbor to strengthen ties with alternative markets such as the European Union and China. This dynamic raises an important question. Will U.S. automakers be forced to reconsider their North American supply chain in favor of offshore alternatives? A comparison of the U.S. and Mexico's trade approaches highlights stark differences. While the U.S. has historically relied on economic leverage and policy-based incentives to maintain manufacturing dominance, Mexico has capitalized on its role as a cost-effective production hub. The result is a delicate balance of interdependence. American companies rely on Mexican-made components to keep costs manageable, while Mexico benefits from the demand generated by U.S. consumers. If Mexico were to pivot toward partnerships with the European Union or China, it could shift the global automotive landscape, potentially reducing America's influence in the sector. The ongoing tension between trade protectionism and global economic integration underscores the complexities of modern manufacturing. While securing domestic jobs is a legitimate concern, the long-term consequences of restricting supply chains can be severe. If production stagnation continues, could automakers be forced to relocate factories entirely, reshaping the future of the North American auto industry? The economic fallout of the ongoing trade dispute is becoming more pronounced across multiple industries, extending well beyond the automotive sector. Stock markets have exhibited significant turbulence, reflecting investor anxiety over disrupted supply chains. Shares of leading car manufacturers, logistics corporations, and major consumer goods producers have experienced substantial declines as financial analysts attempt to assess the long-term ramifications. As consumer confidence wavers, will these market fluctuations translate into broader economic instability? Retailers already grappling with fluctuating costs now face additional challenges due to the tightening supply of new automobiles. Dealerships accustomed to maintaining steady inventories are struggling to meet demand, leading to increased vehicle prices. Consumers seeking affordable transportation alternatives are encountering dwindling options, further exacerbating the strain on household budgets. The pre-owned vehicle industry, which had only recently regained equilibrium following the disruptions of the pandemic era, is again witnessing rapid price escalations. Agriculture, an industry seemingly unrelated to automotive production, is now bracing for the possibility of retaliatory tariffs. American farmers depend heavily on exports to Mexico, a vital trading partner for produce, grains, and livestock. Any disruption in this commercial relationship could create devastating financial consequences for rural economies, many of which are still recovering from previous global trade conflicts. Commodity prices may experience volatility as market uncertainty grows, affecting not only farmers but also food suppliers and consumers alike. Manufacturers and various industries are now re-evaluating sourcing strategies to minimize exposure to future disruptions. Some businesses are considering shifting production facilities to alternative locations, while others are exploring domestic manufacturing as a safeguard against unpredictable trade policies. However, such transitions require significant investment and logistical adjustments, which may not be immediately feasible for every company. The broader economic consequences of this trade conflict are not limited to business sectors alone. Rising costs in transportation, production, and distribution will inevitably filter down to consumers, potentially influencing spending habits and overall economic growth. With inflationary pressures already a concern, additional price increases on essential goods and services could further dampen consumer confidence. The long-term viability of affected industries hinges on whether policymakers can negotiate resolutions that stabilize trade relations while protecting domestic interests. Global trade dynamics are shifting rapidly, and economic interdependencies mean that disruptions in one sector ripple outward, affecting seemingly unrelated industries. As companies reassess risk management strategies, some may seek new partnerships or invest in technological innovations to enhance supply chain resilience. The financial landscape remains in flux, leaving investors, businesses, and consumers navigating an unpredictable economic environment. As the standoff between the United States and Mexico continues, global economic players are closely observing the evolving situation. European and Asian automakers, already considering Mexico as a viable manufacturing base, have intensified their efforts to establish stronger trade relationships with the country. Could this shift signal a long-term transformation in global trade patterns? If manufacturers from outside North America prioritize Mexico over the United States, the economic repercussions could be profound. American industries, particularly in automotive and electronics manufacturing, may find themselves struggling to compete as production relocates to a more cost-effective environment. While tariffs imposed on imports are designed to protect domestic businesses, they could have the unintended consequence of accelerating offshoring, thereby diminishing the nation's industrial strength rather than reinforcing it. Mexico's appeal as a production hub is not accidental. The country has cultivated a skilled labor force, developed efficient logistics networks, and secured favorable trade agreements with over 50 nations, including the European Union and Japan. By contrast, increasing trade restrictions in the United States create uncertainty for businesses that rely on stable and predictable supply chains. How might this shift affect American employment and wages? If more companies establish operations south of the border, job losses in U.S. industrial sectors could rise, particularly in states heavily reliant on manufacturing, such as Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. The ripple effect could extend beyond factory closures, impacting suppliers, logistics companies, and even local economies dependent on industrial employment. Beyond the automotive industry, other sectors are also evaluating the benefits of relocating to Mexico. Electronics, aerospace, and medical device manufacturers are among those considering expansions, driven by favorable tax incentives and competitive labor costs. Additionally, the ongoing evolution of nearshoring, where businesses move production closer to their primary markets, has positioned Mexico as an increasingly strategic player in global commerce. Will the United States respond by revising its trade policies to maintain its competitive edge? Policymakers face mounting pressure to address concerns from industries that feel threatened by shifting production trends. Some experts argue that instead of imposing tariffs, the U.S. should focus on incentivizing domestic manufacturing through tax breaks, infrastructure improvements, and workforce development initiatives. Strengthening education and technical training programs could equip American workers with the skills needed to compete in an evolving global economy, mitigating the risks associated with job displacement. As economic realities shift, the decisions made today will shape the trajectory of North American trade for decades. Whether the U.S. adapts to these changes or maintains policies that inadvertently drive business elsewhere remains to be seen. What is clear, however, is that Mexico's role as a manufacturing hub is only growing stronger, a reality that will undoubtedly influence international trade dynamics moving forward. The White House now faces a critical decision: Will the US government double down on tariffs, risking further economic fallout, or will diplomatic negotiations pave the way for a resolution? Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle are already pressuring the administration to de-escalate the trade conflict before the economic damage becomes irreversible. Rising costs for essential goods, disruptions in manufacturing, and uncertainty in financial markets have intensified concerns among businesses and consumers alike. For Mexico, the challenge is maintaining economic stability while asserting its own trade interests. While its economy remains deeply tied to the US, diversification efforts in recent years have provided Mexico with leverage. Strengthening trade agreements with China, South America, and the European Union has reduced its dependency on American markets, giving it room to maneuver in negotiations. Meanwhile, American companies reliant on cross-border supply chains are warning of potential price hikes and job losses. Automakers, agricultural producers, and technology firms depend on uninterrupted trade between the two nations. How will U.S. industries adapt if tariffs continue to climb? Some corporations may seek alternative suppliers, while others could shift production to countries with lower trade barriers. As both nations remain locked in a high-stakes economic chess match, the long-term consequences of this trade dispute remain uncertain. Will cooler heads prevail, leading to a negotiated settlement that preserves North America's integrated supply chains? Or will political stubbornness escalate the conflict, deepening economic instability across industries and borders? For now, businesses, workers, and consumers are left navigating an unpredictable landscape. The decisions made in the coming weeks will not only determine the future of U.S.-Mexico trade, but also shape economic strategies for years to come. Policymakers on both sides must weigh short-term political gains against long-term economic stability. With midterm elections approaching in the United States, will domestic political pressures influence the administration's next steps? Mexico faces a crucial challenge. How can it foster domestic economic expansion while maintaining strong international trade partnerships? Striking the right balance requires careful negotiation as both nations evaluate the far-reaching effects of their decisions. Beyond tariffs and financial imbalances, what impact will these discussions have on employment stability, corporate investments, and the overall resilience of the economy? As tensions persist, industries on both sides of the border brace for potential upheaval. Companies dependent on cross-border trade may reconsider manufacturing locations, while investors weigh the risks of uncertainty. A prolonged stalemate could weaken business confidence, slow economic growth, and create ripple effects felt across multiple sectors. How will policymakers navigate these complexities without jeopardizing economic momentum? One fact remains indisputable. Without a timely agreement, the financial ramifications will escalate, extending well beyond Mexico and its immediate trading partners. The evolving situation demands decisive action to prevent long-term instability. Every delay increases the likelihood of enduring economic shifts that could alter trade dynamics for years, reshaping international commerce in ways yet to be fully understood. If you found this breakdown insightful, don't just keep it to yourself, smash that like button. Got thoughts on the future of global trade? Drop a comment below and let's get the discussion going. And of course, hit that subscribe button with notifications on so you never miss an update.